präsentiert Schalke 04.
Right, guys, welcome to Sky Betting and Gaming. We're joined by three podcasters from the Bundesliga. So we're going to start with a little bit of an introduction. Stefan, as the kind of one alone here, if you can give us a bit of an intro into the Yellow Wall podcast and tell us about your love of Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We have been at this since 2012, and I am from Dortmund. Right now I'm located in Philly, but originally I'm from Dortmund. So the story of how I fell in love with the club is pretty fairly easy. It was just a stone's throw away from the Westfalenstadion. And I mean, everyone who sees the images of this very enthralling stadium knows how easy it is to catch the thrill of the Westfalenstadion. So the story of me falling in love is pretty organic, especially since I was born in 98. That means I was brought up with players like Michael Zorc and Andreas Möller and such, and Matthias Sammer, of course, and the 1997 Champions League win. So I was treated to a very good Borussia Dortmund team when I was growing up, but I think I also would have fallen in love if they were only as successful as Schalke were back then. And
do you stand on the Yellow Wall as a kid?
Yeah, occasionally. The funny story about my family is that my father was born in Dortmund and my mother was born in Gelsenkirchen, and they moved very close to the Dortmund stadium. However, neither of them cared about football at all. So my love sort of was nurtured more via school and kindergarten and in that way. So I wasn't an immediate stadium goer, but I overcompensated for that later on in life.
Cool. And we've got two Schalke fans joining us today, Richard and John.
Yeah, Stefan's route to Dortmund fandom, certainly a little bit more natural growing up in that area or spending some time there as a youngster. Being from the United States, I had to take a little bit more of a circuitous route to Bundesliga fandom myself. It was really the 2006 World Cup that kind of captured my imagination and sparked my interest in the sport of football in general. And then from there was really just a long sort of exploratory phase where I was trying to learn as much as I could about various world clubs, and ultimately settled on Schalke. I can't really tell you exactly how that happened, but you know, the heart wants what the heart wants, and you kind of fall into these things after a period of time. So been a big supporter of the club for a while, and I'd been looking for a way to contribute to the conversation, and I just happened to come across Richard's podcast, and it can be difficult to find quality English language coverage of the Bundesliga in the States at times. And so I was very excited to have that podcast just to consume as a listener. But I ultimately reached out to him, and we joined forces and been going ever since.
Brilliant. So before we get into the derby game this week and the Revierderby, we'll start with you, Stefan. You can tell us kind of how excited are you just for the return of football in general?
I'm a bit torn. On the one hand, I'm extremely excited just to see any sport on television, to be honest. But on the other hand, this is the 180 Revierderby. It's a game with a lot of tradition, and the derby is really made by the passion of the fans. And if that's is not in the equation, it's just more of a game of sports than the real thing. So I'm very excited to see competitive football on the one hand, but I have to be honest, there is a sense of me where I ask myself, should this actually really be happening, or is the Bundesliga just back up for the sake of it, but no one's really enjoying it in the way it is meant to be?
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I think Bundesliga uses this tagline of football as it's meant to be, and a large part of that isn't just necessarily the product that's on the pitch. It's the supporter culture and all the things that go around the individual match days. So to not have that fan presence in the stadium, it's certainly going to be to the detriment of the spectacle for sure. Both Schalke and Dortmund have incredible stadiums with some of the best atmospheres you're going to find in world football, and that's certainly not going to be the case for this upcoming weekend. So that's a little disappointing, and I understand some people that potentially feel that maybe the match shouldn't even be played until it's safe conditions to have all those fans back in. But I think a lot of us around the world are just craving any sort of sport entertainment that we can find, and this is a pretty good way to get back into action with one of the best rivalries in all of football.
Yeah, I will add in general, right now it feels rather counterintuitive to play football, considering that you want to have social distancing in action and all that. The DFL, the Deutsche Fußballliga, released a very encompassing safety concept, and it's very detailed, which is very nice to see. However, we will really have to wait and see how well it can be implemented. As Richard said, this can be just completely go sideways very quickly. So everything needs to be viewed and seen with the asterisks right now, and I don't know how much fun and long-term enjoyment we will get out of this season right now.
And I think the eyes of the world are really going to be on the Bundesliga during this restart, because I think it's perhaps the biggest league to kind of get back into action here. And, they won't just be paying attention to what's happening on the pitch. They'll be paying attention to how well this restart is implemented and whether or not the Bundesliga runs into any setbacks or roadblocks. And that could potentially have negative ramifications on restarts for other leagues or potentially even other sports if this doesn't go as smoothly as I think everyone is hoping for. So
It has, because a derby like that has literally never happened.
And these are the kind of mental gymnastics that you come to expect from Dortmund supporters.
Yes,
quite honestly, trying to spin the absence of the yellow wall is somehow a positive for Dortmund, despite what is a pretty intimidating atmosphere. But in all
we're
fairness,
going to be renamed into not the yellow wall pod.
but in all fairness, I do think, to Stefan's point, there's so much that's up in the air about this restart. I mean, are the players even fit? That sort of a thing. So there's a lot of elements that typically wouldn't be a part of this fixture that are going to be in play, and it makes it so much more difficult to predict.
Just looking at recent results, it actually looks as though Schalke have a really good record in the 21st century in Dortmund. 4 defeats, including a 4-2 win? And how much does it mean, guys, to come away from Dortmund with a win? Obviously, it must mean a little bit more than the average game.
Well, that specific result, the 4-2 last year, really speaks to the impact that this fixture has, because last season for Schalke was a disastrous campaign by every measure. We were almost flirting with a relegation battle, which for a club of Schalke's standing in the German game is almost unthinkable. Meanwhile, you have Dortmund that are very much in a title chase, trying to knock off perennial powerhouse Bayern Munich, and within a shout of actually doing that. And Schalke, completely against form and in all wisdom that you would say, went in there and Dortmund just kind of self-destructed, and we walked away with the victory. So it was a victory that not only ruined Dortmund's title chances, pulled us out of a potential relegation fight, but then also we get the bragging rights, and it kind of just puts a Band-Aid on how bad that campaign, and it really gives the supporters something to cheer about and to take heart with into a summer of uncertainty, for sure.
Yeah, I think the Schalke Twitter account actually exploded in the best way, where they posted season highlights and was just a black screen for long, then the highlights of that particular derby, and then it was black again. So that summed it up quite perfectly.
So let's go back to the early game this season, the 0-0. Stefan, I think you said it was the worst game in the Bundesliga so far. How did you guys see it from a Schalke point of view?
I actually don't fully agree with that. I mean, perhaps my memory has been failing. Maybe it's so far removed from football at this point, but I think as far as 0-0 draws go, it was one of the better ones, because as we all know, no goals doesn't necessarily equate to boring soccer. It certainly wasn't as exciting as many recent fixtures have been, but it also wasn't particularly dismal. There were chances, I think, for both sides. Schalke, I thought, came out of it looking pretty good for most of it, but ultimately a combination of tired legs and a couple key subs from Dortmund sort of turned the tide, especially in the last 15 minutes. And then Dortmund was really pushing to try to go on and win that thing. Ultimately, no side came out on top, but I mean, you could really feel the intensity and the urgency which all the players were playing with, trying to get that result for their club.
Definitely. Looking at the Bundesliga official website, it's telling me that in 96 league games, this fixture is actually averaging over 3 goals a game. So it's testament to kind of what an exciting game it is, and what a shame it is it's going to be the first game played behind closed doors. But on the other hand, it could be just a game we need to kind of bring us back to life from a footballing perspective. So hopefully we'll get plenty of goals on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't have the specific goal average for the contest between these two clubs specific to the Bundesliga, but in terms of all-time fixtures across all competitions, I think the average goals per game is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 3.2, 3.1, and that's a threshold that's a little bit higher than what the average goals per game is for the Bundesliga in many of the recent seasons. So it really is a fixture that demands viewing, not just because of the story and the history of it, but usually because it generally does tend to be a pretty exciting game with a lot of action. I think this previous 0-0 draw in the Hinrunde was very much an aberration, and so hopefully we get a better product on Saturday.
Well, here's the average goals per game on the road for Schalke this year.
Okay, so I want to kind of pick a couple of players from both sides to get your opinions. We'll start with Dortmund and Jadon Sancho, obviously now an England regular, and kind of just get your perspective from somebody who watches him every week. Just how good is this guy, and what can we expect from him for the rest of the season?
Well, I would say that Jadon Sancho right now is the best player of the Bundesliga. When you combine goals and assists, he's actually leading with 29. And just in so many other departments, even when you don't really see him make things happen, he is making things happen. So he is Dortmund's best player, obviously, this season with the output he has. His creativity, his ability to dribble and beat opponents 1v1 is unmatched for any other Dortmund player. So he has been a revelation. Honestly, this year, I knew he was going to be good, but I didn't expect him to be this good. And what's scary about Jadon Sancho is when you have the feeling that he had a bad game, chances are he's still somehow directly involved in the goal. And if you would count pre-assists, I think to that 29 goals and assists, you would add 14 more. So his involvement, direct or indirect, in Dortmund goals has been immense. So that's around 69% in that area, depending on how you count goals and assists. So yeah, he is an incredible asset for Dortmund, and obviously helps with drawing more British football fans and gaining their attention and what's going on in the Bundesliga, because I think that Jadon Sancho right now is the hottest English prospect there is, and for the national team in England, which hasn't performed very well, he is someone that brings hope.
And do you think you'll be able to hold on to him once the season's over and the transfer window opens?
Yes, the thing is, there are obviously a million push notifications on my phone like every day with a new Jadon Sancho transfer rumor. But I think the market has shaped in a way that it is more of a buyer's market than it's a seller's market. So I think that if Dortmund want top dollar for Jadon Sancho, they probably go and hold on to him to another season if financial markets in general recover. So with his contract running out in 2022, they can do that. And honestly, I think right now it's financially savvy, and you mustn't forget that his worth as someone you can market worldwide and to build your own brand helps as well, not discounting the sporting success that he would add, because it's going to be terribly hard to replace this 19-year-old kid. So or is he 18 still? I don't even know. But yeah, it's fantastic to watch Jadon Sancho. It's a lot of fun because he's one of these players that just dazzles players. He has this move that brings defenders off balance and then can pull the trigger and score a beautiful goal. So he's not only very good, but he's also just very easy on the ice. And yeah, to answer the question, it's likely that Dortmund are going to sell him, but it's become less likely.
And what are the chances of him following in Robert Lewandowski's boots and heading south to Bayern Munich this summer? Chances?
That's very unrealistic, because he's either heading back to the Premier League, or I can very much envision him in a Real Madrid shirt or Barcelona or something like that. I don't think he would make the move to Bayern Munich, but obviously I've now massively jinxed it. And
guys, so we're going to move on to a player maybe not as famous as Jadon Sancho right now, but nevertheless doing big things for you guys. So John Joe Kenny on loan from Everton. I was wondering if you could give us an update on how he's doing for the team.
Well, I think we'd all agree that John Joe Kenny is by far the more promising talent, right? No, he got off to, I thought, a pretty hot start in his Schalke tenure. Scored a goal early in the season, a really nice goal from outside the box, and outside of, I think, a penalty on Alphonso Davies was very solid defensively early on. I think his performances have trailed off a little bit, sort of in line with Schalke's performances in general. But overall, I think it's been a very positive loan move for us, and John Joe Kenny himself seems to be very complimentary of the club and the fan culture and everything, and has himself expressed an interest in staying on with Schalke past the end of the season. So hopefully that's a move that we can lock up and bring him in officially. Schalke's in a little bit of a financial difficult situation right now, and has been for a while. So our transfer budget maybe isn't what we would like it to be. It's going to make that move difficult, but it's certainly been promising performances from John Joe Kenny so far.
Another player, another manager even we're really accustomed to in the Premier League is David Wagner. I'd like to get your guys' opinion on the manager.
Well, if I might chime in, what I think has been the biggest change from last season to this season has been, traditionally Schalke's team is very individual based. That's you feel like it's not really a team spirit, which is sort of against the tradition, against the club, but it's sort of how things developed. Most players don't even live in or around Gelsenkirchen. They are based in Düsseldorf, and there's always that feeling that people just are more looking out for themselves. And I think he has injected more of a team spirit and overall more togetherness in the club that has helped. I think the litmus test really was getting Amin Harid back in shape, who was a terrific footballer but was sort of losing his way at Schalke last season, and really has stepped up. So I think overall it was a very positive move. You never know how things work out in the long term, because Schalke, as we previously mentioned, is a very chaotic club, and things can go down the downward spiral rather quickly, even if you're doing everything right as a coach. They've churned through a couple of coaches in recent history, but overall I think the way forward for Schalke is a really energetic pressing system, because they do not have the players or the budget really to aim for possession-based football, to acquire these highly technical players. So you will always have to be a bit more on the physical side, and I think that fits Schalke anyway, who want to have this, as we say in the Ruhr area, Melocha, which means hard-working football. So I think he is a very good fit for Schalke, which if he's successful, he'll move on, and if things stay as they are right now, they're going to fire him. But overall, the best case scenario for Schalke is that they somehow pull out a good season out of this hat, and then continue a long-term relationship with the coach, because that's the one thing that really has not happened for Schalke. Because I think Jürgen Klopp at Dortmund was there for 7 years, and Schalke in the meantime had 8, 9, 10 coaches. I don't even know. All I know is that when Jürgen Klopp started, Schalke still had Felix Magath, and Felix Magath presented a 4-year plan of how Schalke were going to win the championship, and in that 4-year plan, Dortmund won it twice. So it's all you need to know about Schalke, really.
I would agree with the comments. I think it's a good fit. I think when you looked at what the market was in terms of available coaches or coaches that you could potentially realistically bring into a club like Schalke, I think David Wagner was close to top of that list. I think it was somebody that a lot of fans were relatively pleased to get, somebody who has obviously spent a lot of time in Germany as both a coach and a player, so very knowledgeable about that whole setup and the system. And once again, somebody who tactically potentially, as Stefan just said, with the hard work, his system kind of definitely melds with sort of the club ethos and everything. And time will only tell if it's ultimately going to be a successful move. But I definitely think he's done a decent job so far in terms of steadying the ship from what was a pretty roller coaster tenure for Domenico Tedesco, as high as, second place in the league, and then the following season, almost in relegation. David Wagner's had the team pretty consistently up in those European qualification spots this season. And so as long as he can keep that going, I think he's got a good shot of sticking on, and I'd be happy to have him here.
Right, and so another player who was born in England, who made an unbelievable start to his career with Dortmund, Stefan, is Erling Haaland. If you can tell British fans a little bit about him, just give us an idea just how good this guy could be.
Yeah, it's really one of these very few times where you feel like you really have a phenomena player. I think right now, well, first of all, I think Erling Haaland has a mentality that you need to really make it to the highest ranks in world football. We have, I think in the United States, we have recently talked a lot of Michael Jordan because there's a documentary out there, but also sadly about Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality. But if you want to talk about Erling Haaland and his goal scoring, you first have to talk about the person he is. And I think everything he does is about football and about winning games. So he is a very hardworking player, and that's the first thing that other Dortmund players and his coach described him as someone who's very, very diligent and very disciplined in his lifestyle and his attitude toward the game. And obviously, it has shown. His first appearance for Dortmund was a substitution in like the 60th or 70th minute, and Dortmund were trailing 3-2 in Augsburg, and then he scored a hat trick. And it's just crazy. He has scored 9 goals now in the Bundesliga, and I think everyone has seen his Zen celebration against PSG in the home leg in the Champions League. This guy is a revelation, and he is extremely talented. Obviously, there are still ways for him to improve, but he's very young still, and I'm sure he will iron out the kinks that he still has, especially with that work rate and mentality. And on the football pitch, he's just an absolute monster because he is about as quick as Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang on the first 5 to 10 meters, maybe. For a guy that tall, it's quite insane. And obviously, he has the physicality to muscle other players off the ball. And, he can score goals from almost every position and every angle. His shooting technique is extremely well crafted, and he can score goals with either foot very well. And he just has this instinct knowing where to be at the right time to just poke it home. And it's the sort of striker that Dortmund have been missing for a very long time since Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang left for Arsenal. Someone who just knows where to be in the box when that pass comes, because Dortmund have enough creative players to feed a good striker, and that sort of has made a success. But I will say right away, there's no chance in hell that Erling Haaland will be a long-term thing in Dortmund, because he is definitely destined for greater things. And before we know it, he's going to be playing for Real Madrid or so. But I think he's going to be one of the biggest names in world football in the next 2 or 3 years easily. You can already see how good he is, and he can only improve. And it's I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it's just frightening at what how many goals a minute he scores. So if you want to look up Erling Haaland, always look up his statistics, because they're just insane.
Yeah, his arrival in Dortmund was a most unwelcome development, I think, to Schalke supporters everywhere. I was hoping that he was just going to go straight to the Premier League or some other league, from Austria, rather than coming to the Bundesliga, just because selfishly I didn't want him to end up on any team that we might potentially compete against. Because as Richard said, I mean, he absolutely terrifies me. The mentality of this kid at his age is just unbelievable. And I mean, 2 words to sum up: it's just killer instinct. The guy, I mean, his movement off the ball around the box, he makes runs and commits to like diving in on those runs that other players just don't make. And he wants to score, he has to score, and he's very single-minded about that. And it's been remarkable effect so far. He's truly made an impact, as Stefan pointed out earlier. He scored more goals in the Rückrunde for Dortmund than Schalke have scored as a team so far. He's gotten off to about the best start you could possibly imagine. So if he ultimately ended up being the difference in this fixture on Saturday, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. I mean, the last time these two clubs faced each other, I think Mario Götze was leading the line, was he not? I
Yeah.
mean, how much of an upgrade is that? I
Yeah,
mean, in terms of who's leading,
Mario
yeah.
Götze is a really good footballer, but he is not a number 9. And I think to talk in that same vein, as you said, Dortmund fans really had the opposite reaction because too many times when Dortmund play against Schalke or in the high-profile games against Bayern Munich, it happens that this Dortmund team gets bullied. They have a lot of raw talent, but sometimes mentally they implode, but also just physically they can't compete quite with Bayern Munich. And Schalke are also a very physical team, and it's a very good feeling to have a bully in your own team that everyone else will fear and hate. So it's just nice to have that sort of goal scoring middle finger running around in your team.
So I think we agree that Haaland and Sancho could possibly be the most dangerous players for Dortmund on Saturday. But Richard, Jack, who should we watch out for from Schalke from an attacking perspective?
Yeah, Richard and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the good viewers of Skybet to one Ahmed Katucu, who is our pet favorite on Schalke. He came through the youth system. He's a striker who's generally starting games on the bench, which we disagree with, and so we've started the hashtag Free Katucu movement. Try to get him more playing time. So keep an eye out for him if ultimately he for some reason gets the start or does come on as a sub. But I think conventional wisdom would say that Amina Arid is probably the X factor player for Schalke, the player that's probably most likely to come up with that moment of magic that can sometimes be needed in closely contested affairs like the Revierderby. He was huge for us earlier in the season, bailed us out on a number of occasions, had some really good performances. Once again, trailed off much like Schalke has as a team, but that would be, I think, the guy to watch from our side of things.
Right, so guys, Saturday, can we get a prediction? I know it's hard to do given that it's been so long without football, but can we get a little bit of a prediction from each of you?
Yeah, I would echo Richard's statements. I think if this was happening pre-hiatus, we would not feel maybe as good as we do about things now, given the form of the team. No one really knows how these teams are going to look coming out of this whole break. It's very much uncharted territory for everyone. But because of that, I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to go for a 2-1 win for Schalke on the road.
Yeah, I think due to the lack of rhythm and players not being fully fit yet, since there's not really any rhythm and players aren't as fit as they ought to be right now, I think the potential for mistakes is certainly there. So I'm going with the 4-2 win for Dortmund, just because I think Schalke will score at least one set-piece goal and maybe win an unjustified penalty. And Dortmund then will have Erling Haaland and Jadon Sancho and obviously Julian Brandt, who's one of my favorite players, who can turn it up against the Royal Blues.
Great. And so we've covered off the big game on Saturday. So we're just going to finish off by just looking at the Bundesliga table in general. So for viewers at home, we've got kind of a three-way challenge at the top. Bayern are currently 4 points clear of Dortmund in second, and a further point back to Leipzig. Start with you, Stefan. Can you claw that back, or do you see kind of Bayern pushing on and winning another league title?
Yeah, everything is possible right now, and nobody knows how anything is going to go, how Bayern are going to fare. Well, I think both Schalke and Dortmund fans can agree on the fact that not having any home fans is probably a bigger advantage for Bayern, because they are sort of used to play in front of an opera crowd. So that should help them. But overall, everything is sort of a toss-up in the top 5, really. And I think the onslaught between Leverkusen, Gladbach, Leipzig, and Dortmund for that fourth Champions League spot is going to be an amazing spectacle should the Bundesliga play out for the final 9 match days. I think overall this Bundesliga season has been the best in many, many years. There's a lot of entertainment, and only recently we have seen really that rift between the top 5 and the rest of the league. But yeah, there is potential for a lot of entertainment. Obviously, Schalke can crash that theory quite quickly on Saturday, but I'm hoping it's not going to be, and that Bayern themselves struggle, because some people have, some experts sport medicines, or I don't know how you say it. Sorry, I'm struggling for the word Sportmediziner right now. Can you help me out?
Sports science? I don't know.
Sports scientists, yeah. All right. Some sports scientists a bit smarter than me have recently said that depth in the team will make more of a difference now than it has before. And Bayern are one of the thinnest squads in the Bundesliga. So, if I were Bayern Munich, I wouldn't count my chickens too soon.
And guys, from Schalke's perspective, I'm guessing that success for you guys would be to hold on to that 6th position and hold off the fighting pack below you.
Yeah, I think the chances that we ultimately qualify for the Champions League are probably mostly gone at this point, given the gap that once again has emerged between us in 6th place, right on the bottom end of those European qualification spaces, and Bayer Leverkusen in 5th, 10 points ahead of us. We're much closer to the rest of the league below us than we are to those title challengers at the moment. So I guess the goal for Schalke would just be to close that gap as much as possible and get some breathing room between them and the rest of the league so that we don't potentially fall out of the European places, because Schalke is a club that expects to be in Europe every season. That's how they look at themselves, and also they could probably use the revenue at the moment from that.
Right, well, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to Sky Bet and talk all things Bundesliga. I won't say which team I think will win on Saturday. I'll leave that to you guys, the experts. But thanks again, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and have fun watching the game.